This is Towton. It covers 2 square miles of Nottinghamshire. The occasional train rumbles through, but it's a faint echo of the 50s, when Towton was the busiest railway marshalling yard in the world. Back then, the English Midlands were the centre of the nationalised network of British railways, and everything from coal to bananas passed through here.
In the yard, they're stowing the wagons of the 448 Bristol Leeds fast freight. "15 sealed wagons in this train, all carrying vulnerable traffic like cigarettes, tobacco, wines, spirits, chocolates. And nylons, Mrs. Smith, would be in these as well, if any were being sent."
In the 50s, Britons forgot wartime rationing by going on a spending spree, and 55% of this consumer boom was delivered by rail. Massive 9F steam locos each hauled almost 1,200 tons of freight right across the country. With 10 driving wheels, these monsters raced up to and even beyond the 50-mile-an-hour mainline limit.
You just look back at the train and see how the guard's brake was riding, see how the wagons were riding. And if the wagons were riding all right, you'd perhaps go 5 or 6 miles over your limit.
Especially if you drove an express.
You'd start with a full train from Birmingham, and you could take 60 wagons then, all the way to Carlisle.
This 200-mile trip took 8 hours, in which the fireman shoveled a back-breaking 15 tons of coal. The driver just kept his hand on the regulator and enjoyed himself.
Seeing the seasons change and seeing the scenery change, you went through different counties. You went through the Midland counties, all nice green fields till you got to about Chesterfield. Then it was all pitheads and forges and foundries all the way to Leeds. And once you got through Leeds, you come into some wonderful country. All the way up to Skipton, through the Yorkshire Dales. And when you got to Settle Junction, you started to climb over the mountain. It was a very big long climb all the way to Bleemore. Trains with the cauliflowers, peas, cabbage, they weren't very heavy. But the plum trains, they were very, very heavy. Then across the top it went level, and when you got past Aysgill, you were downhill all the way to Appleby, and then you was up and down all the way from Appleby to Carlisle.
While Tom Wootton crossed the country, many railwaymen never left the Midlands. They worked the dense network of short lines that carried BR right inside factories, breweries, and even holes in the ground. This chalk quarry at Barrington in Cambridgeshire still runs a railway. The Ruston diesels were built in 1963, when they were already the last of the type. But old-fashioned simplicity is the key to economic survival in this harsh environment. the wagons aren't much more than buckets on wheels. In fact, the wagons freewheel the final 100 metres into the cement works, where these 15-ton runaways are stopped with a stick. In the 50s, there was simple technology throughout the rail freight network. Coal still ruled, and most of the 200 million tonnes of coal mined each year was delivered by rail, hauled by steam locos. The six-wheeled 3F was a common sight on local lines, like this one that meandered through Nottinghamshire's coalfields. Although mainly used for shunting, a 3F could haul an entire freight train as long as it had a guard.
The guard was in charge of the train. The reason that he was in charge of the train was in case there was a derailment or an accident, the guard had to protect the train.
The guard was there because the driver needed all his concentration just to control the train.
With a passenger train, you've got a continuous brake, but with these, you'd only got the brake on the engine.
And these trains had loose couplings, so going downhill, the rear wagons would bump into those in front. Then going uphill, they'd all snatch apart, and could even break away.
There's areas where you could have a train of 62 wagons on 3 different gradients, so it was very, very skillful.
Once again, the job was made easier by the guard, who controlled a handbrake in his van at the rear.
When he was going down the down gradient, it was up to the guard to apply his brake so as to keep the wagons taut. So when he got to the end of the basin and started rising again, it stopped all this snatching, and then the train didn't break in two. And that's why the guard had to learn the road. He got to know when he was on a falling gradient, he'd got to know when he was on the level. When you was on the level, you didn't use your brake unless you was being stopped at a signal, then you needed assistance. But other than that, you left it to the driver.
This special arm we're on now, it was more or less continuously in use, 24 hours a day, and you were at it all day long, up and down all day long, shunting. Quite a busy job. You come to work, you was designated 8 hours, but sometimes it might take you 10. Once I was at work 20 hours and a half, so you no food or anything.
It was inconvenient, of course. There was no toilets. We kept the stove going in the winter time to keep you warm, and we used to have a wire around it with one of those steel cans on to keep the water warm, to have a drink, a cup of tea if we wanted one. But it wasn't a lonely life, because you got to be concentrating on the signalling and knowing where you was.
Coal coming from the South Yorkshire coalfield as well as the local coalfield, so it was very busy. In fact, it was that busy, the major sidings, same as Tolton, couldn't deal with the flow of traffic. They used to stand one behind each other, the freight trains did.